Welcome back, world, to the Verbal Intercourse Podcast. Got your host, Nick Walker, here with you today. Shout out to everybody that's been listening. Shout out to everybody that's been sharing the podcast. And I feel like we got some big things coming forward. Shout out to T, who's also back on the podcast as a co-host. And shout out to shout out to my guest, Erinisha Johnson. She's here on the podcast to kind of explain dating with anxiety. So I'm gonna let you start off by kind of introducing yourself and telling the people what you do.
I am Dr. Erinisha Johnson. I am a licensed professional counselor. I currently provide individual and couples and family therapy to children and adults in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay, great. So, oh yeah, my fault for not putting the doctor on the front. I got to put some respect on your name. That's messed up. Okay. But nah, from now on, Dr. Johnson. For the rest of the interview, Dr. Johnson. All right. So I suffer from anxiety. I've suffered from depression and anxiety at the same time. I went to therapy. Me and T, I'm sure I know T, we talked about how we both suffered from anxiety, depression, those types of things. So I wanted to make a podcast episode about dating with anxiety because I feel like anxiety is hard to understand if you're the person that has anxiety and you don't truly understand your own anxiety, as well as dating someone who doesn't have anxiety. So they don't understand the triggers. They don't understand the type of day you could have. And sometimes it's kind of, difficult because you're looking at that person that doesn't have anxiety that you're dating and you're looking at them like, how don't you understand this? But they really don't understand because they're not going through that type of same scenario. So I'm going to just start it off by just giving a general definition of anxiety for those who might not know. For me, I think I would define it as kind of feeling uneasy or not feeling completely in control, even though I'm in a safe environment. How would you define it, T?
I would just say, my anxiety is just feeling like on edge all the time, no matter where I'm at. Not even depending on the circumstances, because it comes and goes at any time. I would just say this feeling of uneasiness all the time and worry.
Mm-hmm. Worry for sure. So Dr. Johnson, do you suffer from anxiety? And could you give us like a legit, like I would say, textbook definition of anxiety?
Yes, I do suffer from anxiety. The best way to describe anxiety is your body's response to stress. But it's not the typical stress. Most of the time is stress about things that may not ever happen, or there's no evidence that whatever it is that you're worried about is going to happen, but your body doesn't recognize that. Your body actually feels as if whatever is happening is exactly what you're worried about. And most of the time it's the worst case scenario.
Definitely. I would say what gives me anxiety a lot is actually working in the healthcare field and seeing so many different diagnoses all the time, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is what messes up my anxiety a whole lot. So so I work out like crazy. I try to eat right, and I try to do stuff like stay away from alcohol, drink non-alcoholic beers or whatnot. You know what I'm saying? But let's talk about it, how it relates to dating. So I'm gonna start off with my first question. I've been looking up stats. I'm always in the stats, trying to put a number on the actual subject. So I found this interesting stat that 40 million adults in the U.S. suffer from anxiety disorder. Women and adults under the age of 35 are more likely to experience anxiety. So I thought that was a very interesting statistic because that's a little bit older than us and on down. And it's interesting that the older population don't really suffer from anxiety as much. statistically, by the book. And I kind of thought that would probably be related to, I would say, social media. I think social media is what's causing our age group to suffer the most from anxiety. Another interesting statement that I saw, another interesting statistic is 41% of people ages 18 to 29% are single and dating in the US. So when you put those two statistics together, I feel like they're kind of mutually related. I mean, that means that the dating population has anxiety, the majority of it, especially the women. So let's talk about that for a little bit. How can we date with anxiety, and how can we find ways to cope while dating someone? So I'll let you answer that, Dr. Johnson.
Number one thing that I always tell clients, especially if they're in couples therapy or if they're in individual therapy talking about their relationship, is to make sure that you're communicating that you have anxiety. We all have some form of anxiety, but of course, some people's anxiety is a lot more intense than others. So it's important that you communicate the intensity of what you're feeling so that at least the other person can be aware of it. You also want to make sure that you're communicating what your triggers are, because if you don't say what your triggers are, how can the other person even begin to understand what it is that you're experiencing? So other than being able to share that you have anxiety, you want to make sure that you have an open line of communication. You want to be able to be honest. You want to make sure that the other person is aware of what it is that's happening with you. And of course, if you're dating someone with anxiety, you really have to go the extra mile, or I would say develop a healthy communication style with that person based off of their triggers, because you don't want to trigger that person even more than what they already are feeling in that moment. So along with communicating, knowing what the triggers are, the other part would be figuring out how to person get better. Meaning, you mentioned earlier just some coping skills that you have. So it's important to know what helps the person that you're dating. So that way you can encourage them to do those things whenever you realize that they're feeling anxious.
Well, me being a single, dating person in today's society, like, what would be like the best way to identify triggers? And also, do you think that a person with anxiety should feel the need to just, work on themselves first? Or do you think that they can work on themselves and understand themselves and their partner while being in a committed relationship?
So to answer your first question, the best way to know if someone is experiencing anxiety is, again, knowing that there are different levels of anxiety. For some people, they may just have the cognitive symptoms where they may just overthink. They may constantly question you. They may constantly feel as if they need reassurance. Some people may have the cognitive symptoms, but they also may have the physiological symptoms, which could be trouble breathing. It could be things such as sweating. It can be anything related to physical symptoms that you can actually see that's happening. So it's important to know, does this person have panic attacks, or do they completely shut down where they just stop talking, they stop answering? So you want to know, what are that person's warning signs that they're experiencing anxiety? The second question that you asked, it's important to realize that anxiety is an ongoing thing. It's not something that can just go away. It's not something that can just, you can cure. It's treated. So therefore, you need to work on your anxiety as an individual, but you have to understand that you don't go into a relationship without still working on yourself, and you can continue improving while you're in a relationship. I also want to point out that you can have a healthy relationship even with anxiety. It's all about making sure that, again, you're having that open communication, honesty, and just knowing what signs to look for and knowing what's helping that particular, your partner, basically.
So, Nick, what do you look for? You don't know, being a male and dealing with anxiety, what do you look for in a partner to help better secure you and your anxiety?
Um, that's a good question. So I think what you look for is like effort, to understand.
Retweet.
Some people don't provide effort into the anxiety. They don't try to, like, I was looking at 8 do's and don'ts for dating somebody with anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the do's was to actually research anxiety and to try to understand better, even if you're not actually dealing with anxiety on your own. So I think it's important that your partner, um, it's important that they put forth effort to research anxiety as well as understand your triggers, like Dr. Johnson said, and also understand what anxiety looks like for you. I know for me, um, I do something like if I have on a collar shirt, like a little collar, like I'm gonna probably be biting the collar. Like I'd be like outside running, but I'm biting the collar to my shirt. You know what I'm saying? If I'm doing that, I'm having anxiety. Or if I'm just sitting there and I'm just, not doing anything productive, I'm probably having anxiety. So that's how I know I'm having anxiety, and I know that is what shows on the outside, but on the inside, my thoughts are, racing, thinking about probably the worst case scenarios. But I think it's just important that a partner, they research it and they try to find ways to help you with it. I think it would just be important for me to just have a conversation about something that's taking me away from it. So some people will sit there and not know what to say. You know what I'm saying? They just gonna be like, if you say, "Hey, I'm having anxiety," they be like, "Well, I don't know what to do."
I don't know what that
Sometimes,
means.
yeah, I don't know what that mean. I don't know what to do. For me, it's important if I could have a conversation to take me away from it. You know what I'm saying? Or do an activity that take me away from it, some physical, or listen to some music that take me away. Or hey, let's do an activity. We ain't got to spend no money. We could just sit here and I don't know, play Phase 10 or play Uno or whatever. Take me away from it. And I think those things are helpful for me. So what about you? What do you think what do you think a potential partner or a partner should do to help you cope with your anxiety?
um well, I for anxiety for me is mostly mental. I do tend to I do shake my leg, the typical. I will get hot if I will.
Mhm.
And when I start noticing myself doing those things, I will try to remove myself from the situation, whatever it may be. So I did typically, if I do have a partner or I'm looking to date a partner, I will explain to them like, hey, you know, I'm very uncomfortable. I need to remove myself, and then I can go into you know, deeper into it after I remove myself. Because if I stay in the situation, I'm not going to be able to explain why I'm feeling this way. Reassurance is a huge thing for me because a pet peeve of mine is do not gaslight me when I'm trying to explain to you what's going on in my head. Like, don't do that. That'll make me very upset because I've been told like, oh, you just have a wild imagination, and it doesn't feel like it's my imagination. It feels like it's reality to me. And so this is a very real thought that I'm having. It's a very real feeling. So a person that I would need to find would be somebody who takes the time to understand me and take the time to understand that whatever I feel is like a real feeling. It's not something I'm making up in my head. It's not something that, I just, woke up well, it was something I woke up one day and pulled out, but it's more it's more than that to me. Like I could think that, aliens were gonna attack us tomorrow, but to me that feels like that's gonna happen. So like the reassurance, the comfort, the communication, because I try my best to communicate, like, because I don't like having to guess what other people got going on, because I'm going to guess wrong, probably. So
Yeah.
I try my best to even over communicate, just so, like, and then that, people who don't understand typically look at that as me explaining myself. And that's something that I do when I'm anxious, is I'll sit there and over explain myself because I feel insecure, or I feel this way, or, there's just a trait that I do when, I'm losing my mind on the inside.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that really gives me anxiety is kind of depending on other people, which is something that you have to do in a relationship, as well as in any type of friendship or whatever. You have to depend on people. And I just think that's just one of those things that gives me anxiety. Also, like, I wrote down a few things and I jotted them down in my mind about things that can give you anxiety about dating. When you're dating someone, like if they don't answer the phone when they usually answer the phone, or if you're eating dinner, and or are you sitting there watching TV on the couch and they start flipping their phone over. How people flip their phone over when they just chilling, like they hiding some, or they don't want them to light up, or I don't know, like you call your partner early in the morning and they don't answer, after a night of hanging out, or they could be asleep, stuff like that can give you like dating anxiety. And I think that comes from past experiences. What you think? Yeah, I think that. Go ahead, Dr. Johnson.
No, it definitely comes from past experiences, whether it be trust issues, or it could also come from not just dating relationships, but even relationships within your family. Growing up, how did your family communicate? Did you talk about what was happening in the home? Did you talk about how you were feeling? Did you talk about being worried about different things? So with dating, you're having to share space with another person. So therefore, you have your own way of dealing with things, and then they have their own way of dealing with things. So therefore, you're having to come together to hopefully develop a healthy way of dealing with some of the things that you just mentioned. Like, okay, if I call you this morning and I don't hear from you for 6 hours, it's like, okay, what's going on? You went out last night, but I didn't hear from you until 12 o'clock the next day. It's like, okay, so now if I have anxiety, even if you have the slightest, anxiety, it's still, of course, your mind is going to start wondering. But if you're someone with high levels of anxiety, it may not even be 4 hours. It could be 2 hours. And you're like, okay, what's going on? Like, okay, did they
Drive by. Let me get in the car and drive by.
that part.
Right, because now you're looking for some type of validation that, okay, nothing has happened. So if that person is aware of that anxiety, that's something that you both should talk about. Like, if, say for instance, if I normally talk to you at 12, and let's say I have a meeting at 12, so I can't talk to you at 12, then part of that can be resolved by me telling you earlier in the day, hey, I got a meeting at 12, so I'm not going to be able to talk to you during my lunch break. So little things like that you have to communicate to help each other out, so that that person's anxiety is not shooting through the roof. Because anxiety is really, and I think T mentioned, is the mental side of it is so heavy.
It's
Right.
crippling.
Because everything makes sense. If I normally talk to you at 12, and today is 12:58 and I still haven't heard from you.
It don't make sense if you don't tell me nothing. It don't make
Right.
sense. It literally does not make sense in my mind why I haven't talked to you if you don't
Right.
tell me.
Right. So now you're thinking, okay, all right, well, I guess this going on, that's going on. You don't know, but it all makes sense. The overthinking, it seems so real when you finally talk to that person. It may be, oh, I got called into an emergency meeting and I couldn't text you or I couldn't call. So now you're like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. But your body is already on alert because you made up all of these scenarios in your head that weren't true, but they seem true.
So, Dr. Johnson, would you suggest being like a couples therapist and a counselor? Being a doctor, period. When do you think is a good time for somebody with anxiety to explain it to their partner? Like, of course, you're not going to be on the first date like, hey, I have anxiety. I need, you to figure this out with me. So, but like, when's a good time? Because I feel, in my opinion, I feel like waiting till you're in a committed relationship's a little too late to introduce somebody. So when do you feel like it's a good time to introduce your partner to, your mental disability?
I would say immediately. If you see that this is a situation that you can see getting serious, I say tell them immediately because it's going to show up anyway. Mm-hmm. It's not something that we can hide for very long. So therefore, get it out the way, because if you're entering into a relationship with someone or I don't know how you all define dating. Some people define dating as dating to figure out if I'm going to get into a committed relationship. And then some people say it's dating if you're not married. How do you all define it?
I think you're dating until you're in a committed relationship. Because I don't believe that you're single till you're married, because that doesn't make sense, because you literally agreed to be in a committed relationship with somebody. But that's just my opinion. So dating is literally like going on dates, getting to know people until you decide to exclusively date somebody, and then you go into a relationship after that.
Okay.
But this is me.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure because I know people have different definitions, and I that's the way I look at it as well. So if you're dating someone, even if it's the other definition, I just think it's important to let that person know, because you're going to be communicating with each other either way. If you think dating is this or that, you're still going to be communicating with that person. So
let me ask both of y'all this, and so how would y'all go about, like, being that somebody doesn't understand anxiety, they could have looked up the definition, but they still think that you're tripping or you're, how would you go about dealing with that person? Like, what's your opinion on when feeling like enough is enough? Because with anxiety, you're typically gonna overthink that process as well when enough is enough. So when do y'all think that enough is enough with a person not understanding your anxiety?
Well, I think honestly, you gotta kind of do the work yourself before you even get to that point. So when you do the work yourself, I feel like, it's been times where I did better work than other times. Like, I think right now, one of these times is like, I feel like my anxiety is up and down just due to the pandemic and what I have to do on a day-to-day basis. But I do things that help me cope, like exercise, like try to eat well, different days of the week, try to minimize alcohol intake, things like that. Try to do things that I find relaxing. So I work on doing the work myself. But then when it comes to with my partner, you kind of have to tell them about anxiety. You have to tell them your triggers, and then also you got to watch how they interact with you once you've gave them the knowledge. So, and I think, months down the road, you can be like, this person really cares about me, or this person doesn't care about how I feel on a 24/7 basis. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I got, you know, a legitimate issue and I'm working on it myself, but sometimes you need extra hand, like a therapist, and also your partner. You know, your partner's supposed to help you out if that's your partner. I mean, that's what they're there for. So I mean, I think I would give it, you know, a couple of months or something like that to kind of see how they address different situations. And if they don't address them how you want them to address it, then you just got to move forward with somebody else, because it is what it is. Like, I mean, it's like Dr. Johnson said, anxiety, you can have, you know, changes to your body. Like when you feel that feeling, I felt it. I've had panic attacks in the past. And you just have a generalized muscle tightness. You stiff, like you barely can move. You know what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, so I think you just gotta put it in their face, and if you don't like how they interact with you after different situations, then you just gotta move forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's all about balance. You have to do the work yourself, like Nick said. You can't say I have anxiety and do nothing. Like you have to develop some type of coping skills, or at least figure out what works for you. But then on the other hand, your partner should be able to encourage you to do those things. For me personally, my anxiety manifests cognitively. So sometimes I need a reminder that whatever it is that I'm thinking, I need to look for the evidence. And that's how I make it make sense for me. We call it cognitive restructuring, where most of our thoughts are irrational. Anxious thoughts are irrational. So sometimes we have to think about, what is it that I'm thinking? Is it actually, what's the likelihood of this actually happening? And sometimes you need that other person to remind you of that, you know. Now, I do want to say your partner can't be your therapist.
Oh,
That's not, you know,
for sure.
they can't be your therapist, but they can at least do things to help you feel better, or even encourage you to go to therapy. You know, sometimes we may not even realize how bad our anxiety is until our partner or somebody, you know, around us lets us know, like, you know, this is the fourth panic attack that you've had in 2 weeks. We can't even have a conversation without you, you know, overthinking. I think you need to get some type of professional help. So sometimes it's that person knowing you well enough to know that your anxiety has been at an all-time high, or realizing that you haven't been coping as well as you normally would cope. So therefore, they need to be able to say, listen, I need you to go and get a counselor. If I need to go with you, or whatever you need me to do, I'm here for you. So you just really want to make sure that you're with somebody who cares about you enough to recognize the signs and to care about how you actually dealing with it. So I guess to answer the rest of your question, if that person is just not willing to learn, or they're not willing to help you out, then they're just not the person for you. Especially if you have anxiety to the point where it's noticeable and it's really impacting you, the relationship is just not going to work.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're exactly right. I mean, I like looking back on it. In my past, someone has told me, okay, yeah, you need to go back to therapy. Like I was going to therapy, I was doing well. Then I took a lapse, and then I didn't have an anxiety attack, but my anxiety about, the root of it was an insecurity that I had. So that was the root of it. But the anxiety manifested into me creating a fake scenario and thinking, and it was so delicately created that it made me feel like it was true, to the point where I was just like, nah, this is what happened. And that's what anxiety does. It'll just put like a whole, like, I feel like it'll put like a whole nightmare in your head and have you believing it. And then when you bring it to the person about it, they like, what the hell are you talking about?
You have lost it. That don't even make sense.
Exactly. You done
To me,
lost
it makes sense.
don't even make sense. And I think I think that's why, you know, couples therapy is good sometimes, because, you know, past relationships, your childhood, just different things, how you were raised to express yourself, all those things kind of are mixed in a bowl and mixed together, and it's kind of, and that's how you end up with the anxiety when it comes to dating and stuff like that. Like, I know, so I got a question for you, T. How do you have anxiety when you're meeting somebody new because you could have just got out of a bad situation or something like that, and you like, well, this guy, he kind of reminds me of something that I used to deal with, instead of just giving him a clean slate and just saying, you know, he might be different.
Okay.
How do you go into a scenario like that?
So, I mean, obviously, it's definitely unintentional. I'm never going to sit there and purposely compare somebody to somebody else. But, for example, past situations for me, specifically an ex, could be a trigger for me. And things that he made me feel like could be a trigger to me. Because I've dated somebody who didn't understand my anxiety, was like, you know, I'm always tripping, you know, I'm always making up things in my head, it don't make sense, he didn't want to hear it. So he constantly made me feel like I was crazy, like, and I know that I'm not. So like, I know that I have a mental disorder, but I know I'm not crazy. And like, he would try to make me feel less than because of these things, but he never once tried to help me, like help me help him. Like, he never tried to understand where I was coming from. He never tried to. So things like that could be a trigger. So if I'm dating somebody new and I've been in a situation where I've gone on a date and they said something similar that reminded me of him, my anxiety went through the roof. I started sweating. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be in this situationship again. But eventually, like, I have a journal. Everything that I think about goes in the journal. And then after I'm done writing about it, I'll go back and read it to see if it makes sense. So, and sometimes it don't make sense. Like, in this all honesty, like, sometimes it doesn't make sense after I've written it all out, said what I had to say, and then I go back to it. So to answer your question, if I unintentionally compare somebody, it was an accident, but I do try to go into things, and that's a thing that I had to work on with my anxiety, with working on myself, is I have to force myself to understand that this is a new person and a new situation. So that, with that being said, I also have anxiety with meeting new people anyway, because feelings scare me. Feelings terrify me. Opening myself up to somebody and like receiving affection terrifies the hell out of me. So meeting somebody new, like, I'm always anticipating them hurting me. And that's something that I have and had to work on. Like, it's an ongoing process. It's not gonna, end tomorrow. But that's something that I have to work on. So going into the situation, I already know what I have to work on. So that's what I would recommend for anybody that's like has new people dating anxiety. Is like, know, like you said, like we all said, know what your triggers are ahead of time, and understand that just because somebody may trigger you the same as somebody else doesn't mean they're exactly alike. So
that's real. I think some people get triggered by horoscope signs too. Like, like real talk.
I mean,
like,
if we're being honest, I don't want to talk to a Virgo again.
Yeah, talk, like real talk. Like, yeah, people. What you say?
I said that's happening a lot right now. That's
Yeah.
online. It's like, what's his name? Justin.
Little boy.
LA. Yeah. Yeah, they are for Libras. I don't understand. I'm a Libra, so yeah.
Yeah,
Oh no,
yeah,
the Pisces got it the worst because he want us to die. So he
yeah,
tried to off all of us. I don't know. I don't know who hurt him, but it
Me
was the
neither.
Pisces
yeah. So,
for sure.
Dr. Johnson. So, to round all of this off, what do you think is the best intervention for couples that have to deal with anxiety in their relationship? Just communication.
Yeah, if the communication cannot be built amongst the two people, I would recommend therapy. Because what therapy would do is it would help you really understand the root of your partner's anxiety. And a lot of times the root of it is based on our attachment styles. And your attachment style is something that's formed when you're a child with your primary caregiver or your parents, your siblings, whoever is in the core of your home. And therapy, what the therapist help understand that your person's anxiety is usually rooted in how they were perceived as a child or how they were taught to express themselves, as we've already said. But the attachment style is so important because so there's 4 attachment styles. You have secure, you have anxious, you have avoidant, and then you have anxious avoidant. So secure is exactly what it says. So this is the person who is comfortable expressing themselves. This is the person who is not afraid of conflict. They're okay with expressing if something is wrong. They're able to accept how you're feeling. They're secure, basically. So this is a person who is able to have a healthy relationship. Anxious is a person who needs that constant reassurance. They constantly need affection. They usually have trouble being alone, and most of the time they find it really hard to trust people. Then you have avoidant. So this is the person who often shuts down. They're not going to express how they're feeling. They're going to basically remove themselves from anything that seems as if it's too intimate or there's too much expectations, too many expectations, or too high of commitment. And then the last one is anxious avoidant, which is probably the most common attachment style. And this is the person who usually suppresses their emotions, but more importantly, they're really worried about being hurt. So they're going to avoid it. They're going to be anxious. This is the person that's they're not going to tell you how they're feeling. They're not going to even question you about how you feel because, again, they don't want to be hurt. So this is the person who stays in a relationship even though they know that they're not happy, they know that it's not working out, but they can't find a way out of it. So it's important to know where you are, and you can be in different ones at different phases in your life. So it's important to know how did that person get to whatever level that they're at. And most of the time, it's based off of a previous romantic relationship, a family relationship, friendships, anything. Because a lot of times our reactions to things are usually based upon some type of traumatic experience or some experience that didn't work out. So if you're in a new relationship, you probably had other relationships, of course, that didn't work out. Whether it was a good ending or a bad ending, something happened where you chose to end that relationship. So therefore, therapy is helpful for the person with anxiety and the partner because most of the time, even the person with anxiety isn't really sure about how they got to where they are. So to answer the question again, if you can't form that communication with your partner without therapy, and you know this is the person that you really want to be with, try couples therapy. It'll help you understand each other a lot better. It'll help you develop those healthy coping skills. It'll help you be able to, what we mentioned earlier, identify triggers. encourage that person to do more. I wanted to touch on something that T said about journaling. I think journaling is extremely helpful because you're absolutely right. You can go back and read it. And if you read long enough, now if you read it right after, it's still gonna make sense. But if you go back and read it later, it's like, okay, yeah, that didn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps you to process it. And most of the time, that's what you really need to process it and deal with it so that you're not having the same recurring thought over and over and over. So processing it by writing, talking about it, especially when you're dating with your partner, making sure that you develop some type of communication system that's going to be healthy is the most important intervention of all. So
That's real. That's real. I think I co-sign with everything you said, especially the communication part. Communicate. I don't think our generation can communicate that well, but I think with emotional maturity, we kind of get to, and the right person, you kind of get to the point where you can communicate pretty good. So we're going to wrap this episode up. I really thank you, Dr. Johnson, for being a guest on the Verbal Intercourse Podcast and providing your insight on therapy as well as dating with anxiety. Really appreciative to have you as a guest. Shout out to T. And hope everybody's staying safe out there. And we out. Peace. Thank y'all.
thank you.